Hey, as a primary caregiver of your child, have you heard of natural or logical consequences before?
I've heard of natural consequences.
What does natural consequence look like that you've seen?
Um, there was a girl that I babysat and she knew not to touch the stove after they took off um the pot of spaghetti when they were cooking and she touched it anyway and then she got burnt.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good example of a natural consequence. Kind of with that. So logical consequences are kind of um less familiar, less known because but we do it most of the times it's just basically a setting a rule or setting a structure within. So it's most effective when it's agreed upon within if it's two parties or one party, like house rules, the preset consequences of certain behaviors. So is there anything that you've kind of within your own kiddo that you would like to target a behavior and have a set consequence for it?
Like I have one who really struggles with work completion,
Mhm.
and even when we're given a bunch of accommodations, so sometimes it doesn't happen, but then he still gets to do what he wants to do because that's how his schedule is built.
Okay.
So it would be great if we could find a way that if he doesn't have his work completed, then he doesn't get to participate in his preferred activity.
Mhm. So how could that structure look different where the follow through or the consistency would be upheld?
Unfortunately, a big problem with it is a lack of communication between other members who work with the student.
Okay.
Um, and also like him not spiraling into thinking that it's the end of the world when he doesn't get to that preferred thing because for so long he's still gotten it when he hasn't completed his part of the deal first.
It kind of sounds like that structure and that those limit settings hasn't been a primary part of his life or been
Right.
followed through. Okay. Okay. So are his consequences maybe in that sense more of a natural consequence, or does he when he does something, does he learn from something from them? Does, it just kind of get brushed off to the side, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, there's like a lack of follow through, and sometimes it does get brushed off to the side because at a
Mhm.
certain time he gets turned over to back over to his parents. And so even though they say that they're gonna follow along with having him complete the work that wasn't completed,
Mhm.
80% of the time it still comes back not completed, and then he still gets to do what he wants at home.
Right.
So, and I know we can't control what happens at home. However, there are some things in school that we could be more concrete on.
Like what? Can you tell me more about that?
Like if he doesn't, sometimes he'll come in at 8:30 in the morning with something to be completed, but he
Mhm.
knows that he can wait out the clock until it's lunch and recess and he'll be allowed to go. And then it's specials and he'll be allowed to go. And now it's the end of the day. We'll state, okay, then this is going to be homework if it's not completed. But he knows
Mhm.
most of the time it's not going to end up having to be completed at home, which then becomes a spiral because then the next morning, guess what he has to do?
Mhm.
And then it continues and continues and continues. And his whole day is spent with just waiting out the clock because he knows that he gets to do what he wants to do if he just waits long enough.
So what are approaches that you've previously tried with this kid?
A lot of prompting and redirecting when he starts to spiral with his emotions and feeling like it's a lot of like everything, like there's no light at the end of the tunnel
Mhm.
because the work is like adding up. And for a while, he had a lot of issues thinking that someone was controlling everybody And that's why we were making him do his work, because someone was telling us that we needed to tell him to do that. And some accommodations have been put into place to reduce that workload. However, those weren't being followed through, which was very upsetting. So we're kind of working on rewriting some of his plan too, to ensure that those accommodations are being followed through, just as a preventative strategy.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Gotcha. With those conversations with him when um he's not wanting to do, do the work or waiting out the clock, are there times where you ever approach it of like, all right, that's fine. We'll just like that kind of approach
Yep.
or
That's usually because of the setting that we're in. He doesn't get a lot of attention when he's supposed
Mm,
to come in.
mhm,
And there's a lot of other things going on in the room. So sometimes that's distracting. And I have to, move him or have him move so that he's not watching like something exciting on the screen that the other kids are getting to watch,
mhm,
because we just don't have room for a quiet space for him to work on. But he knows that I typically don't engage when he comes in, and I remind him of his work and what needs to be completed, ask him if he needs anything. And most of the time, he's capable of doing the work. It's just that work completion aspect. Like he performed in like the 86th percentile on our last test. And that's 50% is exact average. So he was way higher than average. It's just that emotional side of things.
mhm.
But he knows like I'm not gonna sit there and visit with him. I'm just gonna keep reprompting.
Right. So that in itself of you not giving it the attention that he's probably looking for, which it sounds like that's what he's doing, that in itself is a natural consequence of he's not getting the attention that he wants from you, but you so that's interesting to hear that. Well, thanks for sharing.
Mhm.